My name's Alex, and I swear I'm not the type of person who jumps at shadows. I've worked night shifts for years, and I'm used to the kind of eerie silence that makes most people uncomfortable. But what happened to me last December shook me in a way I still can't shake off. I live alone in a ground-floor apartment just outside of Denver. It's not fancy, but it's cozy. Brick building, thin walls, and a long row of windows that face the parking lot. The blinds don't block much light, so I usually keep them shut tight. But that night, I forgot. It was about 1:30 in the morning when I came home from work. I reheated some leftover pasta, sat down at my desk, and turned on YouTube to unwind. The radiator hissed, the upstairs neighbor's TV hummed faintly, and the wind rattled against the old glass panes. At some point, I glanced at the window. That's when I saw him. A man was standing directly outside my apartment, pressed close against the glass. His head tilted slightly, as if he were studying me. For a few seconds, my brain refused to register what I was looking at. I just stared back, fork halfway to my mouth. His face was pale in the glow of the parking lot light, but I couldn't make out his features clearly. The reflection of my own room blurred him. Still, I knew he was looking at me. I shot up from my chair, heart hammering. By the time I crossed the room and yanked the blinds shut, he hadn't moved an inch. My first thought was to call the police, but I hesitated. Maybe he was drunk. Maybe he had the wrong apartment. Maybe I'd imagined it. I cracked the blinds open again, just a sliver. Empty. The lot was quiet, a light dusting of snow catching the yellow glow of the lamps. No footprints, no lingering shadow, nothing. I told myself it was fatigue and too much caffeine. Still, I shoved a chair under the doorknob before I went to bed. Around 3 in the morning, I woke up to a sound I'll never forget. The squeak of rubber soles on wet pavement. Slow, deliberate steps just outside my bedroom window. I froze in bed, barely breathing. The steps stopped. My body went rigid. The tapping came from the glass, inches from where my head lay. I didn't want to look, but some sick instinct made me turn my face toward the window. Through the gap in the blinds, I saw an eye staring in. Not wide, not frantic, just calmly watching. I scrambled out of bed, grabbed my phone, and dialed 911 with shaking hands. I whispered into the phone, terrified the sound of my voice would encourage him. By the time the cops arrived, the man was gone. They searched the lot, checked the stairwell, and even knocked on my neighbors' doors. But something about that explanation didn't sit right. If he was just looking for warmth, why stand there so long? Why watch me? I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, I noticed something strange in the snow just outside my bedroom window. 2 perfectly clear shoe prints. They faced the glass, and they didn't lead anywhere. For the next week, I lived in paranoia. I kept the blinds closed, slept with the lights on, and checked the locks 3 times before bed. I even considered breaking my lease to move. On the 5th night, I woke again to that same sound. Rubber soles in the snow. This time I stayed frozen, eyes wide open in the dark, praying it was my imagination. But then I heard his voice. Low, calm, right outside the glass. "I know you're awake, Alex." He said my name. They treated me like I was losing it, probably some night shift worker hallucinating from exhaustion. That was 3 months ago. I haven't seen him since, but every time I walk to my car, I feel eyes on me. Every time I pass the windows, I half expect to see him staring back. And sometimes, just sometimes, when the wind is quiet and the neighborhood is still, I swear I hear those footsteps in the snow again. I don't know who he was, how he knew my name, or why he chose me. But I do know this: if you live on the ground floor, close your blinds. Because once you've seen someone watching you through the glass, you'll never feel safe again. My name's Melissa, and I've been house sitting since college. Most gigs are boring. Feed the cat, water the plants, bring in the mail, easy money, but last summer I took a job that made me question if I'll ever do it again. It was for a couple named Henry and Laura. They were in their late 50s, both professors, and they lived about 40 minutes outside of town in a big colonial-style house. They were friendly enough, but a little off. When I first met them, Henry kept repeating the house rules like he was drilling them into me. Keep the doors locked at night. Don't answer the landline if it rings. And whatever you do, don't look out the back windows after dark. I laughed nervously, waiting for him to grin or wink. But he didn't. He just stared until Laura changed the subject. I should have said no, but the money was good, and I figured maybe they were just eccentric. The first 2 nights were uneventful. I read on the couch, watched some Netflix, played with their elderly cat Daisy. The house was creaky, but I chalked it up to old pipes. Then came night 3. It was close to midnight when the landline rang. The sound jolted me upright. It was shrill, echoing through the empty house. I remembered Henry's rule, so I let it ring, and ring, and ring. It felt like forever before it stopped. I tried to shake it off, but 5 minutes later, it started again. This time, I stood next to it, hand hovering over the receiver. I don't know why. Curiosity, maybe. But I remembered Henry's face, how serious he looked when he told me not to answer. So I let it ring again. That's when I noticed something strange. The cat, Daisy, had padded into the living room. Her fur was bristled, tail puffed out, staring directly at the back windows. I followed her gaze. The house had a wall of tall glass panes that overlooked the backyard, but the night was so dark they looked like mirrors. I couldn't see a thing outside, just my own reflection in the glass. But Daisy hissed. Low and sharp, the way cats do when they're cornered. I felt cold all over. Slowly, I turned off the lamp so the room went dark. My reflection faded, and for a moment I thought I saw something. A figure, standing just beyond the glass. I bolted upstairs and locked the bedroom door, heart racing. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, I tried to convince myself I'd imagined it. Maybe it was just the shape of the trees outside. Maybe Daisy was reacting to something else. But when I went into the kitchen, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The back door, the one that led to the yard, was unlocked. I swore I'd locked it. I always lock doors, especially in someone else's house. That night, I decided to stay upstairs. I brought Daisy into the guest bedroom and closed the blinds tight. I left the TV on low, hoping it would drown out my nerves. Around 2 in the morning, the landline rang again. Even upstairs, I could hear it, that shrill, endless ringing. Daisy tensed at the sound, ears flat, eyes fixed on the door. And then 3 slow knock. My heart felt like it stopped. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The knocks came again, deliberate, waiting. Finally, I forced myself to peek through the blinds. At first, I saw nothing, just the faint glow of the backyard light. Then my eyes adjusted. There was someone standing in the yard, barely visible at the tree line, perfectly still, facing the house. I stumbled back from the window and hid in the bathroom until sunrise. When Henry and Laura came home 2 days later, I tried to tell them what happened. Their reaction? Henry just nodded, like he already knew. Laura wouldn't even look at me. Before I left, Henry said, "You didn't answer the phone, did you?" "No," I said. He gave the smallest smile. "Good, don't ever." That was it, no explanation. I haven't heard from them since. They never left a review, never called me back for another job. And me? I stopped house sitting. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm in my own apartment, I think about that house. The glass wall, the ringing phone, the figure in the yard, and I wonder if they're still standing there, watching, waiting for someone else to break the rules. This happened when I was in college, about 7 years ago. I still think about it every time I wait for a bus alone at night. I was 20, living off campus in a cheap apartment. I didn't have a car, so I relied on the city bus. My classes often ran late, which meant most nights I was getting home around 11 or midnight. The stop I used was on the edge of downtown, just a metal bench under a flickering streetlight. At that hour it was usually deserted, but one night in October I noticed her, an older woman, maybe in her late 50s. She was standing near the bench, dressed in a long coat, staring at the road. I figured she was just waiting for the bus too. When it pulled up, I got on. She didn't. She stayed on the sidewalk, watching. I thought it was odd, but forgot about it. The next night, she was there again. Same coat, same spot, same blank stare. Once again, she didn't get on the bus. This kept happening. 4 nights in a row. She never spoke, never moved much, just stood there. Always at the exact same spot by the bench. By the 5th night, I started getting uneasy. When I walked past her to board, I risked a glance. She was staring at me. Not in a casual way, not like you look up when someone passes. Her eyes were locked on me the entire time, unblinking. I hurried onto the bus, trying to shake it off. Maybe she was homeless. Maybe she had nowhere else to go. I tried not to judge. But then came the 7th night. That night, I left campus earlier than usual. The sun had just set when I reached the stop, and there she was. Only this time, she wasn't by the bench. She was standing directly under the streetlight, as if she wanted to make sure I saw her. I sat as far down the bench as possible, clutching my bag. My skin prickled. After a few minutes, I pulled out my phone and pretended to scroll. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her take one small step closer. Then another. By the time the bus finally arrived, she was only a few feet away. I jumped on and sat near the driver. Through the window, I saw her face illuminated by the streetlight. She was still staring at me. The driver must have noticed my nerves, because he asked if I was okay. I just nodded, but my hands were shaking. The next day, I decided to switch up my route. I left campus from a different building and walked to a different stop, 3 blocks away. I felt relieved when I got there. Different bench, different corner, no woman. But when the bus pulled up and I climbed aboard, my stomach dropped. She was there. She didn't get on with me. I hadn't seen her anywhere on the street, but there she was, coat buttoned, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on me as I walked past. I chose a seat near the front. My heart was pounding. The whole ride home, I could feel her gaze burning into the back of my neck. When the bus reached my stop, I hesitated. If I got off, would she follow? I looked at the driver. Could I stay on until the next loop? I asked. He frowned but nodded. I stayed put. The woman didn't. She got off at my stop. I twisted in my seat to watch through the window. She didn't walk away from the bus stop. She just stood there on the sidewalk, watching the bus pull away. I don't think I've ever been so scared in my life. The driver must have seen the terror on my face. When the bus emptied, he asked again if I was okay. This time, I told him everything. The woman at the stop. How she kept showing up. How she'd followed me onto the bus. He got serious fast. "Don't ride home alone for a while," he said. "And if you see her again, call the police." That night, I crashed at a friend's dorm. I didn't sleep much, kept picturing her face under the street light. The strangest part? After that night, I never saw her again. Not at my usual stop. Not on the bus, not anywhere in the city. It was like she vanished. But sometimes, when I'm out late and see someone lingering near a bus stop, I feel that same chill crawl up my spine. I wonder if she's still out there, watching some other poor student. And I think about the way she looked at me, like she already knew where I'd be, no matter how I tried to avoid her. It was my freshman year at the University of Michigan, and I was living off campus with my best friend from high school. Our apartment wasn't fancy, just a one-bedroom we split 2 ways, but it was ours, which was enough. The previous night had been long. We'd gone out to celebrate the end of midterms and didn't get home until way too late. I slept poorly, waking every hour, and by early afternoon I was exhausted. When I got home from my morning classes, the apartment was quiet. My roommate was still out. Without thinking too much about it, I collapsed onto the living room couch, facing the backboard, and let myself drift off. I must have fallen asleep almost immediately. I don't know how long I'd been out when I woke up, but something felt off. There was a pressure in the air, like the apartment was too aware of me, a sense that I wasn't alone. I turned around slowly and froze. About 15 feet away, standing in my living room, was the maintenance man. He wasn't doing anything, just standing there, pretending to look around like he had business elsewhere. But something was wrong. He wasn't making eye contact. I could feel it, that invisible tension of being watched. I sat up fully, and that's when he slowly turned toward me. His eyes met mine. "Oh, I didn't see you there," he said. "Why are you in my apartment?" I asked. He smiled faintly, as if everything was normal. "We're doing a routine inspection." I froze. My brain was screaming no. That's impossible. There was no way he hadn't seen me asleep on the couch. I had heard him come in. Had I? No, I hadn't heard anything. No knock, no door, nothing. I'm usually a light sleeper. I wake up at the slightest noise, but this, I didn't even hear him enter. I tried to think logically. Maybe he had been let in by my roommate, but no, my roommate was still in class, or at least that's what I assumed. And even if someone had let him in, inspections weren't supposed to happen without notice. I forced myself to speak again. "You didn't knock or anything. How did you get in?" He shrugged, still smiling faintly. "Oh, you know, just routine." Routine. The word felt like a cold hand around my chest. I didn't know what to do. I considered calling my roommate, or even campus security, but my phone was in the kitchen. Moving would put me closer to him, and something in his presence. I couldn't shake the feeling that he had been standing there watching me for much longer than just a few seconds. I stood up slowly, trying to put as much distance between us as possible. "I think you should leave." He tilted his head slightly, studying me like a cat before deciding whether to pounce. "Are you sure?" "Yes, you're not supposed to be here." He straightened, still calm, still smiling faintly, as if I was the one overreacting. Then he just turned and walked out. No words, no apology, nothing. Just left, as though he'd been invited in for tea. I stayed frozen on the couch long after the sound of the door clicking shut. My hands were shaking. I couldn't tell if I was angry, scared, or both. Later that evening, my roommate came home. I wanted to tell her immediately, but something about saying it out loud made it feel too real. I explained what had happened, and her reaction was the opposite of what I expected. She frowned, skeptical. "Maintenance? That doesn't sound right. Did you get a name?" I shook my head. "No, I didn't even hear him come in." We checked with the apartment office the next day. There hadn't been any maintenance scheduled that week. No one had signed in for an inspection. No one had been in the building at all, aside from residents. We asked about the maintenance man. The office manager showed me a picture from the building ID card database. It was the same man I had seen. But there was a problem. He retired 2 months ago. Hasn't worked here since before the semester started. I laughed nervously, but it wasn't really funny. I told my roommate. Her eyes went wide. "So, someone broke into the apartment?" That was the only explanation that made sense. But the terrifying part wasn't that he had entered it, was how calm he was, as if he belonged there, as if he had been expecting me to be asleep on the couch. I've never slept on that couch again. I can't bring myself to. Even now, I can't tell if what I saw was real or if it was something else entirely. Something that knew exactly where I'd be, exactly when I'd be vulnerable, and was waiting. I don't know if the maintenance man ever comes back. I don't want to find out. I grew up in Florida, and when I was 22, I lived in a small apartment in a coastal city called Clearwater. It wasn't much, just a one-bedroom place on the second floor of an older building, but you could walk to the beach in under 10 minutes. I thought I was lucky to have found it. The apartment had one feature I loved and hated at the same time, a sliding glass door that opened onto a balcony facing the street. From the balcony you could see palm trees swaying, cars passing by, and the glow of neon signs from restaurants at night. But the thing was, that balcony had always felt off to me. I don't know if it was because the sliding glass door never really locked properly, or because I lived alone and had this fear someone could climb up and get in, but I always made sure to wedge a bar in the track at night so no one could slide it open from outside. One summer evening I came home from work later than usual. The sky was still faintly orange, fading into twilight. I unlocked the front door, stepped inside, and immediately noticed something strange. The curtain over the sliding glass door was moving slightly, swaying back and forth like someone had brushed past it. I froze in the doorway, listening. My apartment was small. You could see most of it from the front door. The kitchen was to the left, the living room in front of me, the hallway to my bedroom off to the right. Everything was silent. No footsteps, no breathing, just the low hum of my fridge. Trying to convince myself it was nothing, maybe just the air conditioning kicking on, I checked the balcony. The curtain had been pulled back just a little, and I could see the sliding door wasn't fully closed. It was open, maybe an inch. My stomach dropped. I knew for a fact I had wedged the bar in place that morning before leaving for work. I always did. I slid the door shut, put the bar back into place, and walked through the apartment, checking every closet, corner, and under the bed. Nothing. Nobody. But I couldn't shake it. That sick feeling that someone had been inside. That night, I double-checked the lock and the bar, even pushed a chair up against the sliding door just in case. I left the TV on low volume in the living room, hoping the noise would make me feel less alone. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to a sound. At first, I thought it was part of whatever late-night infomercial was playing on TV, but then I realized it was coming from the balcony. It was the sound of someone gently pressing on the glass. A soft, slow rattle, like fingers testing the door. I didn't move. My bed was just down the hall, but from where I was, I couldn't see the sliding door. I held my breath, straining to listen. The rattling stopped. Then came the sound of a low, deliberate push against the glass. The kind of sound you hear when someone is checking if a window will budge. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding in my ears. The chair I'd shoved against the door creaked as the pressure shifted it slightly. I wanted to scream, to call someone, but I was frozen. Whoever was out there was quiet now, maybe listening. Maybe waiting. Finally, I grabbed my phone and my voice was shaking as I whispered to the dispatcher what was happening. She told me to stay on the line, stay quiet, and that an officer was on the way. It felt like hours, but it couldn't have been more than 5 minutes before I heard footsteps on the stairs outside and a knock at my front door. Police. When I opened it, 2 officers stepped in, flashlights sweeping the room. They checked the balcony, but of course, there was no one there. Just the faint outline of smudges on the glass, like greasy fingerprints. One of the officers asked me if I had any enemies, anyone who might want to scare me. I told him no. I didn't know anyone here except the people I worked with. They wrote up a report, told me to call again if anything else happened, and left. I barely slept that night. The next day, I asked the building manager if the security cameras had caught anything. She told me there weren't any pointed at my unit. But honestly, she said, you're not the first tenant to complain about strange things on that balcony. Someone else who lived there a couple years ago swore they saw a man climbing up onto it in the middle of the night, said he'd disappear before they could call anyone. She shrugged like it was nothing, but my stomach turned. That evening, I bought a length of chain and a heavy-duty padlock, looping it through the door handles so there was no chance of anyone forcing it open. It made me feel safer, but only slightly. Because here's the thing, a lock can stop someone from getting in, but it can't explain how the door was already open when I came home that night. And it can't explain why, sometimes when I'm trying to sleep, I still hear faint tapping on the glass, like someone out there hasn't quite given up. I had just finished a long, grueling night shift, the kind where you're exhausted but your body won't let you rest, and the fluorescent lights still seem to hum in your brain long after you leave work. By the time I got to my apartment complex, the world outside had fallen silent. Snow had started to dust the empty streets, and the only sounds were the occasional car passing by and the crunch of my boots on the pavement. I parked on the third level of the garage, right in front of the stairwell, the way I always did. It was dimly lit, with flickering overhead lights that cast more shadows than they eliminated. Usually, the garage felt safe. It was quiet, controlled, and familiar. That night, something felt different. I grabbed my keys and stepped into the cavernous parking area. Immediately I noticed it, the sound of footsteps echoing behind me. Not the natural echo of my own, but another set, light, deliberate, and perfectly in sync with my pace. I froze. My heart stuttered in my chest. Probably someone just leaving, I told myself. A neighbor, a late worker, nothing to worry about. But the footsteps didn't stop. They matched me step for step, even when I slowed down, even when I quickened my pace. There was no casual rhythm, no hesitation, no pause for a distant conversation. Just mirrored movement. I forced myself to keep walking, trying not to look back. My keys felt heavier in my hand, and the instinct to run was almost overwhelming. I reached my car, a nondescript silver sedan, parked under a flickering light. Relief should have washed over me, but instead, the hair on the back of my neck stood on end, and then it happened. A figure appeared from the shadows near the far end of the garage. I didn't get a good look, just the flash of a dark jacket and a hood, but I could feel their gaze on me, fixated, like a predator waiting for the perfect moment. I fumbled with my keys, panic tangling my thoughts. "Hey!" I shouted instinctively. My voice echoed off the concrete walls. The footsteps didn't falter. The figure broke into a run. My heart lurched into my throat as I yanked my car door open and dove inside. I slammed the lock just as the first blows rained down on the windows. Hard fists pounded the glass, rattling the car like it might collapse under the force. I pressed my hands to the steering wheel, fumbling desperately with the horn and the car alarm, praying anyone would hear. The alarm blared, shrill and piercing, bouncing through the empty garage. The pounding didn't stop. The hooded figure slammed into the car again and again, each hit sending a jolt through the metal frame. I could hear muffled shouts somewhere in the distance, maybe from other residents, but it wasn't close enough yet. I swung my foot to the brake, then hit the accelerator lightly, rocking the car forward to make space. My hands shook uncontrollably. Every instinct screamed at me to fight back, to escape, to survive. The figure backed off for a moment, crouching low, circling, then charged again. I slammed the horn, my voice cracking as I yelled for help. My mind raced through every scenario, every possible way this could end. If I moved too soon, I could get hurt. If I didn't move fast enough, I could be trapped. The garage seemed to stretch endlessly around me, each shadow a potential hiding spot for my attacker. Then, almost as suddenly as it began, the pounding stopped. I glanced around, barely daring to breathe. The figure had disappeared into the shadows near the stairwell, melting into the darkness like they had never been there. I didn't waste a second. My hands were slick with sweat, my pulse a drum in my ears, but I started the car and eased forward, my tires crunching over the scattered snow that had blown into the garage. The alarm still blaring, I drove slowly at first, eyes darting to every corner, every dark space where someone could be lying in wait. I reached the exit ramp and saw flashing lights below. Security. Someone had responded. Relief flooded me, though it didn't erase the terror still clinging to my skin. I waved frantically, letting them know I was the one in danger. By the time I reached the street, I finally dared to take a deep breath. My body was shaking uncontrollably, my hands still gripping the steering wheel as if it were the only thing keeping me anchored to the world. I didn't look back, and I didn't stop driving until I was blocks away, the warmth of street lights and passing cars feeling almost surreal after the suffocating darkness of the garage. I filed a report with the apartment security and local police later, but by then, the image of that figure, silent, relentless, stalking me step by step, was burned into my mind. They never caught him. There were no witnesses, no security cameras that had captured his face, just the lingering dread that somewhere, maybe in another dimly lit parking garage, he was waiting, watching. Waiting for his next target. I still park near the front of the garage now under the brightest lights. I always check my mirrors, I always lock my doors immediately, and I always glance over my shoulder before walking to my car. Because that night taught me something I didn't want to learn the hard way. Some dangers aren't abstract. Some threats aren't stories you read online or warnings you shrug off. Some are real, and they wait patiently in the shadows, counting your steps, following your every move, and sometimes, just sometimes, they almost catch you. It was late when I pulled into the driveway close to 10:30 p.m. Emily's soccer game had run long, thanks to an overtime tiebreaker, and by the time we packed up and drove home, most of the neighborhood was already asleep. Emily had dozed off in the back seat, still in her jersey, shin guards poking out awkwardly beneath her socks. Our neighborhood isn't anything unusual. Just a quiet Midwest subdivision, rows of split-level houses with wide lawns, trimmed hedges, and the occasional porch light left on. During the day, it's the kind of place where kids ride their bikes down the cul-de-sac and neighbors wave when they mow their lawns. But at night, it feels different. Quiet. Too quiet. The street lamps cast small circles of pale yellow, but the spaces in between are long stretches of darkness. I parked at the edge of the driveway, like I always do. Our house sits a little further back from the road, and that short walk from the car to the front steps can feel endless once the sun goes down, especially on nights like this, when the silence feels heavy, like the whole neighborhood is holding its breath. I slung Emily's backpack over my shoulder and opened her door. "Come on, sweetheart, we're home." She stirred, rubbing her eyes, then stumbled out and clutched my hand as we started up the walkway. That's when I felt it, a sharp, crawling sensation at the back of my neck, the instinct that someone was watching us. At first I brushed it off. I told myself it was late, that my nerves were raw after the long day. But then I heard it, the faint crunch of gravel. Not ours. Another set of steps, just far enough behind us to make me question it. I glanced back quickly. Nothing. Just the parked car in the driveway, the sleepy street beyond, and a lone street lamp flickering down the block. We climbed the steps. I juggled Emily's bag while digging in my purse for the keys. My fingers wouldn't work right, fumbling clumsily like they weren't mine. That sensation like eyes were on me was so strong that I could barely breathe. And then, just as the key slid into the lock, I turned my head. There he was. A man stood less than 20 feet away at the end of our walkway. Tall, thin, his clothes rumpled and dark. His face looked gaunt with sunken eyes, hollow cheeks. Stretched across it was a grin that froze my blood. He wasn't just passing by. He was moving toward us. "Inside, now!" I yelled to my daughter. My voice cracked as I shoved Emily through the door. I slammed it shut and twisted the deadbolt just as his footsteps broke into a sprint. I could hear the pounding of his shoes on the concrete, feel the slight shake of the porch under his weight. The lock clicked just in time. Silence. Then the soft ding of the Ring camera activating. I pulled Emily close, backing us away from the door. On the other side, I heard him breathing, slow, heavy, and then nothing. When I checked the footage, I almost wished I hadn't. The man was standing directly at our door, staring into the camera lens. That grin still plastered across his face, so wide it looked unnatural. He didn't speak, didn't knock, just tilted his head slightly, like he was studying us. Then, after several seconds, he darted off the porch and melted into the shadows of the street. I called the police right away. My voice was shaking. A patrol car came through the neighborhood, lights sweeping over the tidy front lawns and closed curtains of my neighbors' houses, but he was gone. I thought it might be a one-time thing, a terrifying encounter, but over. That night, though, I sat at the kitchen table with Emily was asleep upstairs and decided to scroll through old Ring camera footage. What I found made me sick. There he was, 3 nights earlier, standing just out of reach of the porch light, half hidden at the edge of the walkway, perfectly still, watching. 2 weeks before that, another clip. I was walking Emily to the car in the morning, and in the background, almost too blurry to notice, the same figure lingered at the far end of the street. The more I scrolled, the worse it got. He appeared again and again in the margins of our camera footage, always when we were leaving or returning, sometimes close, sometimes far. He'd been memorizing our schedule, studying us. I shut the footage off and sat in the dark, trembling. I could see the houses across the street through the window, silent, neat, peaceful. It was almost impossible to believe someone had been standing out there, night after night, waiting, watching. That night, I checked every lock in the house 3 times. I dragged a chair against the front door like some flimsy barricade. I couldn't close my eyes without seeing his grin burned into my mind. The police promised extra patrols, but with no name, no car, nothing concrete, there wasn't much they could do. And somewhere out there, in the quiet dark of my neighborhood, I knew he was still around. Now, I never walk to the front door without my keys ready. I don't linger in the driveway. I always check the Ring app before I step out of the car, because I know what's out there. Some people don't just pass through. Some don't give up after one try. Some watch. They wait. They smile into your camera like they're letting you know it's not over, and I can't stop thinking. If Emily had dropped something, if I'd fumbled with the keys a second longer, if I hadn't looked over my shoulder, the door might not have shut in time. I work late nights at a diner just off the interstate in a Midwestern town. By the time I clock out, it's usually close to midnight, and the drive home takes me through long stretches of empty road, broken up only by gas stations and the occasional truck stop. One particular night, I was running on fumes and had to pull into a 24-hour gas station. The place was mostly deserted except for one car parked off to the side. I noticed it right away because it wasn't near a pump or even in a parking spot. Just idling. Its headlights were off, tucked into the shadows. I pushed the thought aside and went about filling up my car. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed, throwing pale, uneven light across the lot. It was quiet, too quiet, except for the sound of gas rushing into the tank. That's when I felt it, eyes on me. I glanced over my shoulder and saw a man standing just outside the store entrance. He wasn't browsing the aisles or coming out with snacks. He was just standing there, half in the doorway, half outside, staring directly at me. I tried to act casual, but every nerve in my body was screaming. He was tall, gaunt, with a shaved head and a heavy jacket despite the warm weather. His face didn't show anything. No smile, no frown, just a kind of blank intentness that made my stomach turn. I capped the tank and forced myself to move at a normal pace. I didn't want to show fear, even though my hands were starting to shake. I got into my car, locked the doors immediately, and that's when I saw him start moving. Not toward the store, toward me. My heart rate spiked. He wasn't rushing, but his pace was steady and deliberate, like he already knew where he was going. I jammed my key into the ignition, praying the car would start on the first try. It did, but as soon as the engine roared to life, the man changed his speed. He broke into a fast walk, then a jog, heading straight for my passenger side door. I threw the car into gear and tore out of the lot so fast the tires squealed. My eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, and my blood ran cold. That car, the one I'd noticed idling in the shadows, pulled out right behind me. At first I tried to tell myself it was a coincidence. Maybe he was just leaving at the same time. But the longer I drove, the clearer it became. He was following me. Every turn I took, he took. Every time I tried to slow down, he matched my speed. I didn't want to drive straight home. The last thing I needed was for this man to know where I lived. So I headed back toward the busier part of town, praying there'd still be some life on the streets despite the late hour. My mind was racing. Who was this guy? What did he want? Was it just a mugging or something worse? I gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white, scanning the road for any sign of help. Finally, I spotted it. Blue lights in the distance. A police cruiser was parked on the side of the road, maybe running radar. Relief flooded through me. I flicked on my blinker and pulled right in behind the squad car, coming to a stop. The man's car slowed as it passed. For a split second, I saw his face in the glow of my headlights. And this time, he wasn't expressionless. He was smiling. A wide, unnatural grin, stretched too far, like he was enjoying the whole thing. Then he pressed the gas and disappeared down the road. The officer got out and asked if everything was all right. I was shaking so badly I could barely get the words out, but I explained what had happened. He nodded, calm and steady, like he'd heard this kind of story before. He told me I'd done the right thing by not driving home and offered to escort me back to my apartment. I didn't see the man again that night, but for weeks afterward I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, maybe waiting at another gas station, watching someone else pump gas, waiting for them to be alone. To this day, every time I stop for fuel after dark, I can't help but scan the lot, heart pounding, looking for that blank stare, or worse, that grin.